But as I was learning about food as medicine, I also was learning about how we could use food as medicine for other chronic issues that unfortunately plague 6 in 10 Americans, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and then the diet-related diseases that plague fewer of us but are still important, the gut health issues like IBS and IBD and Crohn's, autoimmune conditions. There's a whole long list of all of the different conditions that food impacts, or food causes, or food cures.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Samantha Citro Alexander, co-founder and CEO of bitewell. In this episode, we discuss the company's digital food pharmacy. Sam shares bitewell's approach to mainstreaming food as medicine. Plus, we discuss the role of employers, health plans, policymakers, and startups in transforming well-being. Let's get into it. Today's episode is brought to you by EGYM. EGYM provides fitness and health facilities with smart workout solutions built on its ecosystem of hardware, software, and partners. But it's more than cool tech. Their connected training experience delivers business results while helping members reach their wellness goals. If you run a gym, health club, YMCA, or any kind of fitness facility, you should check them out. Visit egym.com to learn more. Hi, Sam. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, excited to chat today. Lots to get into around food as medicine and also what you're working on. So let's start there. What is bitewell, and maybe a little bit about you and the company, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, of course. So bitewell is a food as medicine company. What does that mean? We're going to talk about it. But tactically, what we've created is something that's called a food pharmacy. And if you think about going to the pharmacy, like walking into CVS, walking to Walgreens, why are you there? You're there to pick up a prescription because you are already sick, or you're there to grab something over the counter because you feel like you're coming down with something, you need some help, or you're there to pick up a supplement of some kind because you want to prevent illness. All of those things are the same in our food pharmacy. But instead of stopping by to pick up pharmaceuticals for those things, you're picking up food.
Yeah, it's hugely important. And I think increasing access to that, right, removing the barriers is the step in that direction. In terms of implementing that, what it looks like, who's using it from a customer side, give us some context on like what it's like to use it, implement it, and who you're kind of selling to, how it works on the business side.
Yeah, absolutely. So our food pharmacy is entirely digital. So functionally, it feels like an online marketplace of healthy food that's personalized to you. So it's like shopping on Instacart or Uber Eats or any of these other platforms that you can buy food on online. But instead of seeing the whole world of food from, the local pizza shop next door to Sweetgreen to, Whole Foods, you're only seeing the food that is tailored to your health needs, conditions, and goals. Because we sort the world that way or filter the world that way, we are able to bring bitewell to you through the healthcare system. What that means is that we work with health plans and we work with employers who sponsor health plans to include bitewell food pharmacy access as part of your overall suite of benefits, in the same way that, Calm or Headspace might be included for a mental health benefit, or ClassPass might be included for a fitness benefit. bitewell is your food as medicine benefit.
Yeah, that piece too, I think, one, sorting it and giving me the things that I need tailored to my kind of health goals, but also seeing who picks up the tab, right? Like who's paying for this, who's incentivized to do this, and removing obstacles to it. Like that's a huge question. And when it comes to that point, like why would an employer pay for it, or how does it qualify for a health plan to do that? What are the parameters, or how do we even start down that path of like, yes, this qualifies as food as medicine versus this is just a healthy product that is better for you, but what does better for you mean?
Cool. I'm going to take us way back in answering this question for you, because I think we have a couple steps that we need to take to get to the detailed answer of like, how do the nuts and bolts of food as medicine, this new emerging industry, how do they work? So I'm taking you back like 25, however many, 20 years. Insert number of years that doesn't tell you how old I am. I had my first experience with food's impact on health when I was about 11. I was a really healthy kid and then started having these pretty terrible gut health, gastrointestinal issues that made eating really challenging for like a 6-month period as we tried to figure out what was going on with me. We ran a bunch of different tests, so many tests, such that like getting blood work done to this day is still terrifying for me. We ran a bunch of tests, they all came back nothing. My pediatrician at the time was concerned that I wasn't eating enough food or getting enough nutrients because seemingly everything was bothering me. And so suggested that I drink these Ensure, whole milk based shakes to try to get some nutrition into my body. That made things worse. And that's how we found out that I was severely lactose intolerant, which was causing all of these other issues. And we clearly removed the whole milk based shakes from the diet and moved on, right? And so that was my first experience with food not as medicine, food as medicine not working out, eating something that my body did not want me to eat. And kind of from that 11, 12 into my early 20s, I had a hard time with food. I was like a perennial Tums popper after after every meal. I imagine there are some people listening who can relate. It's like after every meal you're taking Tums to just try to keep baseline. So in my early 20s, I was working on a skincare brand that had its roots in this Indonesian herbal medicinal tradition called jamu. And through working for that company, I got to learn about jamu. And through learning about jamu, I got to learn about food as medicine for the first time in practical application. And then I spent the entirety of my 20s redesigning how I eat, learning everything that I could about food's impact on my health and using food to drive positive health outcomes for me. What that meant for me was not being a Tums popper for the rest of my life. What that meant for me is increased energy. What that meant for me is brain fog going away. It was those types of things. But as I was learning about food as medicine, I also was learning about how we could use food as medicine for other chronic issues that unfortunately plague 6 in 10 Americans, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and then the diseases, the diet-related diseases that plague fewer of us but are still important, the gut health issues like IBS and IBD and Crohn's, autoimmune conditions. There's a whole long list of all of the different conditions that food impacts or food causes or food cures. And so when I think about food as medicine, what it means to me is the practical application of using food as a tool inside of our healthcare system. And so giving practical application to our providers, to our health systems, to our plans to be able to cover so that you can use food as a tool in the same way that you use a pharmaceutical as a tool.
Yeah, it's not really a question, right? Like even like there's so many different stories or anecdotes and examples of people, myself included, that making these adjustments, unfortunately, through seemingly just endless trial and error, right? You're just left on your own to try to figure it out. And a lot of people don't. I don't know what the number is, but it seems to be just like a over complication of like this, whether you get to it through the healthcare system or you're fortunate enough to seek out like a nutritionist, dietitian, or maybe you figure it out on your own, but like there's all these different paths and all these different ways and all these different products, and or unfortunately it's not getting brought up at all, right? Food is it's not even getting a part of the equation, just such that at some point, at least from the healthcare perspective, it needs to be defined or studied or clinically validated, and there needs to be the outcomes measured. How do you address that in terms of both the digital food pharmacy and just in general when we talk about food as medicine, to say like, yes, it works anecdotally, but now it works according to healthcare such that they're willing to pay for it?
When I talk about where food as medicine is in its life cycle, I often relate it to other kind of wellness industries that have made the transition into healthcare. And the one that fits so naturally to me is what has happened with mental health care, right? Mental health care for a really long time in this country and in many parts of the world was seen as a wellness activity. It wasn't clinically validated, it wasn't clinically proven. And for people who are listening, I'm using air quotes. Um, we didn't have we didn't, define the treatment of mental health issues outside of acute mental health issues as healthcare. They were really like, wellness modalities. Over the last 20 years, mental health industry has had this massive shift where it's now a much more accepted part of the healthcare ecosystem and is thought of as part of your core healthcare toolkit or set of tools of what's available to you as a provider when you have a patient who comes to you and has a problem. To me, food as medicine is in the middle of that same shift. And we are definitely nowhere near 20 years in. We're maybe 5, really, maybe 3, depending on whose clock you're using. If you use the clock starting point as the National Conference on Health, Hunger, and Nutrition that happened in 22, which is the clock that most people are using right now. We're, 2 years and some change in. So we're really early. And what that means is that to bring food as medicine solutions to patients who need it, we need to both get it to them through a wellness lens. So how can we get this to people in as many avenues as possible using the tried and true go-to-market of wellness, and at the same time start building up your clinical library of evidence about how food as medicine is used in practice with patients and providers, so that by the time that we're 5 or 8 years down the line and healthcare is ready to start thinking about food as medicine as part of the ecosystem, we have this massive library of evidence available to show and to prove that what we know, as you said, anecdotally works, actually works in practice.
There's an interesting that comparable with mental health, because even within, if you think about mental health, the spectrum from yoga, breath work, just physical activity in general and the benefits there, all the way to like psychiatry and prescription and like, more serious diagnosis. And then how that's conveyed, like you said, I think that's put very well, like through the wellness lens of just like, hey, let's get this out into the world and let's have people start to recognize it and come to their own conclusions about it and benefit from like riding that wave. And certainly Calm and Headspace, right, did that from like the mental health perspective. And then as they get into the kind of B2B world, we've seen them both from the very much like wellness consumer side shift into, hey, how do we reinvent ourselves as like a healthcare company? There's challenges to that, like the efficacy that goes into it, the testing, the studies, and then proving to these companies, both employers and health plans, that like, here are the results coming out the other side, that this is why you're going to continue to pay for it. What is that, the both education process and then like quantifying outcomes like at bitewell to say like, yes, we are validating this kind of as we go to prove that like this is something you should one do in the first place, but then continue to do as it goes on.
Yep. Imagine with me, if you would, this web of needs, because the answer to your question is not linear. If you imagine needs as a web, right? The health plans have needs, employers have needs, patients have needs, health systems have needs, everybody's got needs. We've got needs. And to be successful, everyone's unique needs need to be met through this web. And what those needs are changes over time. So when we're thinking about offering a program to a health plan, as an example, a food as medicine program to a health plan, if we start with their need to control costs related to GLP-1s becoming available and covered by many, many different employers, that is a much harder need to start with, although it's a valid one and one that we spend a lot of time talking about, than the need to get members to engage on their platform. If we start with a member engagement need and we think about food as medicine as a tool for member engagement, that's a really easy conversation or exchange of needs. Food has been a motivator throughout time. When companies think about bringing people back to the office, the first thing they do is say, we're going to offer lunch on Wednesdays because food drives people to do things. And so if you think about offering food as medicine in exchange for members engaging with other parts of the healthcare ecosystem, in exchange for them engaging in coaching, engaging in, getting lab work done, engaging in going to your annual physical, there's a really easy connection point there. Once you find that need connection point between what we currently have to offer and what the current need and most immediate and easiest solved need is of our client, then together we can plan out, okay, we know we're starting here with member engagement, but over the next 10 years, we can help you to drive toward these other needs that you have, knowing the efficacy of food as medicine. We can prove this out together. We can build our library of evidence together. And then you build the cost construct of the program around that so that what's available today for member engagement is a much perhaps lower cost option than what will be available 5 years time with, multiple clinically validated health outcomes associated to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, I guess, to what extent solving these needs is the partnership customized per employer, per whoever that, say, on the other side of it is. Like, is it more bespoke, so to speak, or is it more like this is the benefit kind of that you're buying in terms of bitewell, and then how you implement it is more so up to you?
So the product itself, so the access to the pharmacy and the way that food is filtered inside of the pharmacy to buy things that meet your needs doesn't change. That is the product. Product is the product. The IP that drives that, which we call the bitewell Food Health Score, which actually today we announced has clinical health outcomes validation for 10 different outcomes, which we're very proud of, but took us a long time to get to. So that IP that drives the filtering of the pharmacy, that doesn't change. But what does change and is customizable is the engagement program inside the pharmacy. So some clients will choose to cover the cost of food. That's of course the gold standard, but it's also wildly expensive to do for large swaths of people. And so some of them will subsidize the cost of food up to a certain percentage, up to a certain amount per year, depending on condition. Some will just invest in a rewards program. So if you spend $100 on food, so you're putting your own money in first, maybe you get $25 back in rewards points or kind of rewards dollars that are redeemable toward buying more food on the pharmacy. So some people are comfortable with that level of investment. And so I think that's what's not custom. It's not really bespoke. It's just you have different levels or tiers of engagement available to you in terms of what you, the buyer, are willing to subsidize for your people, your members, your employees, or your patients.
The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by our friends at EGYM. This is an exciting partnership for us, and not just because EGYM makes some of the most innovative fitness products out there, but because the entire EGYM team, led by their CEO Philip, is committed to making health, fitness, and well-being more accessible for everyone. And that's a mission we can get behind. By combining their smart equipment with integrated software and hundreds of connected partner brands, EGYM helps fitness facilities stand out by delivering a personalized, gamified workout experience that improves outcomes and member engagement. So if you're a gym or health club operator thinking about how to best serve your members while driving business results, go see what EGYM is up to at egym.com. Yeah, no, I think that's really that approach. You know this, but novel in terms of how you're able to turn these dials to increase the access or subsidize access, because that is ultimately the question when you're sitting on the healthcare or employer side, is like, even if you get them to the place where it's like, yes, I recognize that this is a good thing, right? That we should be providing this benefit. It's like, okay, who pays for it? Do we pay for it? Do they pay for it? Does the health plan pay for it? And that's where you dig deeper into food as medicine. And it's like, okay, actually medically tailored meals. So like this each meal is customized for this person, or we're subsidizing healthier foods, like produce prescriptions and things like that. And now down this path of like, even if you think of like a, you know, online grocery store who's now you can use SNAP, or now you can use HSA, FSA, or there's bigger, maybe a benefits aggregator that's like rolling food, some type of food benefit into it. How do you think about like that landscape and where bitewell kind of sits and maybe evolves within it?
Yeah. So, um, the landscape is very wide, partially because food as medicine, the umbrella category, is actually solving two problems that I think we would be best served pulling apart. There's a food insecurity problem, a food access problem that is solved under food as medicine. That food insecurity, food access problem could also be solved outside of food as medicine. Maybe. And then there's a nutrition insecurity problem. That's a separate problem from food insecurity. It's I have the means to put food on the table, but I don't know what food to put into my body for my unique and particular needs. The nutrition insecurity problem must be solved by food as medicine. There is no other way. And so I think that we would be really well served as an industry if we separate out those two problem spaces to help us define what we're talking about, because there are a suite of services or a suite of solutions for which solving for food insecurity is the right set of solutions, and a suite of solutions for which solving for nutrition insecurity is the right set of solutions. And sometimes they cross over and sometimes they don't. And part of the challenge of selling a food as medicine solution today to any buyer, to any one of those buyers, systems, payers, employers, aggregators, individuals, is that you first have to define what actually you're talking about. Like, what is your need? Do your people, when I'm talking to an employer or a plan, are your people having trouble affording food? Do they live in rural areas where they have trouble accessing food? Do they have trouble managing diet-related conditions through food, but don't have those other, those first two problems? How wide is this issue within your organization? Do you want to give access to a food as medicine kind of tool to everyone? Do you want to focus specifically on those with chronic diet-related conditions? Do you want to focus specifically on those who have financial issues related to food? Where are we first and foremost on the map? And then once we understand where we are in the map, then I can help you to understand if bitewell is or is not the right solution for you. And for us, we think of ourselves really as a nutrition insecurity solution. Yes, of course, because of the very, wide swath of food vendor partners we do have the ability to get healthy food to every zip code in the country. And so, of course, you can use us to solve a food access problem. But there might be a less expensive way for you to do that. Of course, we can help you to give you a mechanism for subsidizing the cost of healthy food to solve, food cost and food affordability related issues. But are we the best solution to do that? Maybe, it depends on your needs and your budget, but we definitely are the best solution to help your people who are navigating a chronic diet-related condition find and buy the right food for that condition. That is for whom we are the perfect solution. So it's complicated. It's really complicated because it's so wide.
I'm glad that you kind of broke that down, because it's part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation. And it's why, within the broader health and fitness and wellness landscape, we're continuing, on this podcast to try to have conversations around food as medicine and the various approaches. And there are so many layers, because in one sense, it's like, we need to talk about it and educate people and make them aware of it in the same way, like through the wellness lens that you talked about. But then as you go further down the path, like, okay, now that we are trying to address it, like, which aspect are we trying to tackle? Because to your point, they are different things. And I think what typically comes to mind is, how do we deliver, for lack of a better term, whether that's directly to somebody's home or where, like at work, like the nutritional meals for them. And it becomes like this logistical nightmare of like fresh foods and delivery pickup, all these things, food safety. And where you sit is like the infrastructure, software layer, vendors, partners. Was there ever a consideration, like as you start to think about tackling this problem of like actual food and like actual delivery and the meals versus like the software, the infrastructure, the, the employer benefit, like where did like that genesis and like decision to like, this is the version of this that we are going to tackle? If you could maybe like shed some light on like that. I don't know if it was an aha moment or like the trade-offs that went into that, and like maybe why this was the right move for bitewell.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Of course, we talked about it. It's food as medicine. You got to talk about if you're going to create food or not. And it was really less about, what is the right decision for bitewell, and it was more about what is the right decision for the patient who we're serving. So we interviewed tons of patients, and we focused because our focus, we were very clear from the onset that our focus is solving that nutrition insecurity problem. We want to be there for you in that moment of diet related diagnosis. And so we started interviewing patients in that moment of diet related diagnosis, kind of within 6 months of being diagnosed with a diet related condition. Do you feel like we need to define that, or do you feel like we're good on diet related condition?
If you have a go-to definition, fire away.
I find it's helpful to define because sometimes people are like, what are you talking about? Diet related condition, meaning a condition that is either caused by or can be managed through food. And so that, like we were talking about earlier, could be diabetes, obesity, heart disease, kind of, there's a long list. We actually contemplate 37, and our list is unfortunately growing by the day. But we wanted to be there. We wanted to be your partner as a patient for that moment of diet-related diagnosis and then figuring out what to do. And we were hearing the same thing over and over and over again from patients who are in that moment in life. They were looking for ease, like how can I use food to manage my condition in the easiest way possible? And they were looking for choice. How can I use food to manage my condition in the easiest way possible in a way that feels like it fits into my life? Food, I think, is a really interesting part of healthcare, and we didn't really touch on, why we're here or why we've had all of these diet-related issues, growing over the last 75 years. Part of it has to do with our food supply, a large part. Part of it, too, has to do with the fact that food is both fuel, sure, but it's also very social. It's very cultural. It's how we express love to each other. It's how we build relationship. There's a lot of emotionality tied to food. And that doesn't change just because you have a condition that can be managed through food. And so you want the same level of choice and experience that you had before. And when we heard those two needs from the patient, making food didn't seem like the right solution to us. Being a navigation tool felt like the right solution to us. Because if you have a tool that helps you to easily navigate all of the different ways that you could eat food in your life, that doesn't tell you you can't go out to dinner with your friends, but instead says when you go out to dinner with your friends, here's a view of the menu that helps you to understand which of these things you might want to choose if you don't want to feel like crap tomorrow. That is what the patient needed. So that's why we built the way we built.
Yeah, it's super smart. And I think obviously much needed, especially when you think of, as you talked about it, like it is so difficult because food supply or healthcare and everything between, where does the kind of blame lie? It's like everybody, it's not one of those issues, struggles where if you have an addiction problem, so to speak, it's like, well, avoid the drug that's causing the problem or whatever. That it's like you can't not eat food. So you have to navigate this in a very sensitive way, and it's like omnipresent, right? And so when you think about, if we zoom out to the broader food supply, healthcare, there are systemic issues that are incredibly complicated, difficult. On one hand, very simple, but on the other hand, very difficult. And I always think this is an interesting lens to think of it through from like the operator's perspective or a founder or somebody who's solving these problems, because it's like you have to control the controllables and what you're working on and how you go about it, while also recognizing like the contradiction that exists within the food system, within the healthcare system. How do you navigate that? We should be fixing all of these things out here, but like you as an individual or bitewell, like you can't do that, but maybe you can have the impact and change and all those things if you do the thing that you're doing over here. Like how do you balance that? How do you think about these broader problems, and if it's even like we can change these things, or it's like we just have to control what we can control?
I think like most founders, I'm slightly delusional in thinking that that I can change the world. And so our mission as a company is to improve the world's health through food. My belief is that there's some of that we do with our product and with the thing that we sell, the thing that we created. And there's some of that work that we do alongside that is more nonprofit-esque, right? Meaning we will be lobbying around the labeling of ultra processed foods and how ultra processed foods impact the body as we receive our dietary guidelines for Americans in 2025. That's work that we're doing. We will be working with food manufacturers to make sure that they're provided with the data that they need to be able to make the food that people both need and want to eat, right? How can we influence at the manufacturing level? How can we influence at the policy and regulatory level? I think both of those things are my job. And so I do them both. And to me, growing the business and, touching and helping as many people as we possibly can through the food pharmacy by giving them that navigator, and growing our influence in that way then allows us to take that influence and that support of the millions of people that we touch and say, hey, food manufacturers, hey, regulatory bodies, hey, health systems, hey, payers, these millions of people need help. And here is how we would suggest that you help them. And through size and scale, we can influence change.
Yeah, it's huge. It's doing the day-to-day of running the business and serving all the stakeholders and continuing in all the employees, and while also doing to your like the mission driven, almost nonprofit-esque, like changing the kicking a dent into the world, for lack of a better phrase. Like it's much needed. And I also have thought a lot, and I know there's kind of the coalition building really around the nutrition, food as medicine, through the White House and those types of things. But even I've thought about this a lot, but haven't formalized like what the actual, execution would look like. But all of not just food as medicine, the call it new wave of digital health and wellness companies coming together to say like, look, what if we tried to do this work together to really shift, not lack of physical activity, everything from the school PE classes to school lunches to youth sports to food as medicine, and like really start to shape that. Like, yeah, I just think it's much needed. And we're all kind of working in the same direction. And so like leveraging that, I think will be super interesting. And if not, like in the meantime, it's like, yeah, it is the work of folks like yourself to really change that trajectory.
And I think that that's not only possible, but it's what's required if we're going to move. Everyone talks about moving from a sick care system to a true healthcare system. But what that actually means is like if we're going to move the incentive structure from one where the system is improperly incented to one where the system is properly incented to help people prevent disease, yeah, we're all going to have to do that together because we've got some big enemies out there who have a lot of capital, both human capital and capital and political capital behind keeping the status quo. And it's scary to go against that, but if we all do it together, I think, that's the only way that it could be.
Yeah. It's the kind of interesting, when you think of, call it this next wave or, very mission driven health and wellness companies, there's like reinventing the system or realigning the incentives or like functioning within the system or creating a new system, right? And it's very difficult to try to say like, are we building this from scratch and like we have to create this new world where everything operates in this well care and incentives aligned and kind of like idealistic way, or is it like, do we have to figure out a way to like operate within this system to shift things and go up against the powers that be to build our own coalitions and get everything on our side? It's difficult. It's not an easy either way you go about it. Like there's no easy way to do it.
No. And unfortunately, I think the answer is both.
As we kind of wrap up and think about, we obviously talked about it at a high level. What does if you want to think about it as roadmap or just things that you're excited about in terms of where bitewell is, where it's going, whether it's like excitement or roadmap or just things we should look out for, that you're working on?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mentioned, but I'll say again how proud I am of my team for our food med certification that we announced today. We put our food health score, that IP that I talked about that helps you to navigate the food supply, through some pretty kind of clinical rigorous testing, and found that it does really move the needle and change health outcomes for people. And so I'm very proud of that. And that's something we've been working toward for a long, long time. Upcoming, we have pretty meaningful partnership announcement that'll be coming out over the next quarter that changes our scale. And that's all I can say about it. Otherwise, I think my comms team will kill me. But it's very exciting. That's something that we are spending a lot of time working on this year. You will certainly hear more from me on the ultra processed foods regulation front. We are, taking on some work in that space toward the second half of this year. So expect to see me, stomping around Washington trying to get things done.
Yes. Keep us posted on all the above. Happy to share all the partnership announcement, the kind of advocacy announcements as well. And for folks who also want to keep up, learn more, check you out, website, social, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, Samantha Citro Alexander. Company website's always a great place to go to, bitewell.com. Those are the best ones. I'm only going to give you two. Not going to overwhelm you.
No, that's perfect. We'll get that linked up and tell folks to check it out. And like I said, we'll be following along. So thanks so much for making time today. It was a great conversation, an important one. So thanks for making time.
Thank you. This was great.
One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fitt Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.